What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I am introducing a new segment here. This was an idea I've been toying around with for a while, just because I like to organize and categorize music in different ways so I can come up with different videos. And this one has always intrigued me, so I'm doing a thing called States of Metal here. Pretty much what I'm doing is going over states in the United States, and eventually I want to get outside of the United States, but we're going to start with the United States first since I'm from here. And I'm pretty much going to break down different styles, different scenes, different types of metal that originate from those states and, pretty much have kind of defined a state's scene, or at least to some degree it has. Naturally, being from Ohio, I wanted to start in Ohio. And it seems like a good time to do it because right now, Ohio has a really solid death metal scene. It's really kind of come up in the last few years. Lots of bands that I'm going to bring up are definitely well known in that, but there's definitely some more obscure ones, more underground ones. And while this resurgence of death metal in Ohio is a relatively new thing here, just in terms of being a bigger scene, it wasn't always that way. There were definitely a lot of killer bands in the past that just didn't quite get the recognition, or they didn't stick around for very long. But I want to get a good variety in here in terms of past and present and just sort of different styles of death metal. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. So let's talk about Ohio. What is Ohio known for? Well, I mean, here recently, death metal, but I mean, of course, we have Korn, people that say Ope a lot, also guilty of that. Perpetual road construction, I mean, I would say we crush more pavement than our fucking sports teams crush our fucking hopes and dreams here. Rust Belt towns, and I might as well say Korn again because there's a fucking lot of it here. But again, we have a really solid metal scene, and right now the death metal scene is really just fucking exploding here. So much like my underrated albums videos, I'm gonna go over 10 different bands, and this time it's not necessarily that they're all underrated. Actually, a lot of these are pretty well known, but I wanted to put out what I think is some of the best representation of Ohio death metal that there is. And as an added bonus, I threw on an Inoculation shirt. They didn't quite make the list because I already had a whole bunch of stuff on here, but I definitely wanted to shout them out because that's another killer band from Ohio that you should definitely check out. But let's get down to what I do have. Descendent Degeneration. This is the lone full-length from this Toledo-based death metal act. They formed in 1993 and then broke up sometime after this album, which came out in 1995. This was my legit first experience with Ohio death metal. I don't think I'd listened to any other death metal act from Ohio at this point. I picked this up used forever ago, and I have loved it pretty much ever since. This came at a really pivotal time. I was just getting into death metal and thrash metal, the more extreme stuff, and I was super high on Cannibal Corpse and Obituary and Suffocation, and this band pretty much had that sound just flat out. I would describe this as a blend of, Cannibal Corpse, very old school Cannibal Corpse, circa The Bleeding and Tomb of the Mutilated, but also a little bit of that extra brutality you get from Suffocation. Fierce 90s style production, which, I mean, it came out in the 90s, that is to be expected, but I love the mix of really good thrashy riffs on here. There's lots of pummeling drum work. Brian Norwalk's vocals, I think, are quite exceptional on here. He has a very dramatic delivery. He enunciates everything well, and it sounds just evil, and he has a really good range, high screams, sort of a mid-range, and then ultra low, just gurgly growls. The riff work is absolutely outstanding on here. Lots of thrashy riffs mixed in with really brutal kind of doomy riffs. The tracks that I always seem to come back to are the Heir Apparent and Godseed. Both of those just are flat out intense riffy songs, but the big standout on here, just for it being such a strange track, and it is technically 2 tracks broken up, but it tracks as one on the CD, so it is kind of hard to pick out where the next track starts, but it's this very long 10-minute song that is very different from anything else on the album. This is the most atmospheric track on here. There's lots of tribal ambience and whispers and just a very I don't know, evil, dark sounding atmosphere. It's almost like Neurosis stepped in and worked with a death metal band, because in between that you get some absolutely pummeling death metal with some really cool melodies on it. It is an odd break from the intensity of this album because, I mean, Godseed is an absolutely fucking monstrous song, and then you get this long atmospheric song, but honestly, I kind of like it. It adds a lot of variety to the album, and It's just a weird, fucking dark, moody piece. Now, as I said, this band broke up, well, I don't really know, and neither do the archives, but they broke up sometime after this was released, obviously. Now, two of the members went on to form Wretched Vermin, which was a grindcore act. I believe they were kind of in the vein of Pig Destroyer. I did see them once at a Toledo death metal festival years ago, and they were pretty solid. Brian went on to do tattoo work. He's actually a really well-known tattoo artist here in Toledo, but he also does have another musical project called Blood and Bone, which actually features a member of a band that I'm going to bring up later in here. So these guys still seem like they're pretty active, but in terms of like a crown jewel here, in terms of Ohio death metal, this is an absolutely underrated gem. Actually, I think I brought this up in an underrated albums, God, fucking forever ago, back when we didn't know shit about lighting or audio or any of that stuff. But I wanted to bring this one up again because it's such a fucking awesome album. If you have not checked this out, strongly recommend it. Of course, there will be links to all this music down below. For me, this was the catalyst that made me want to check out more Ohio bands, and maybe it's the catalyst for you guys to check out more Ohio bands. Either way, strongly recommend checking it out. 200 Stab Wounds, Slave to the Scalpel. I imagine right now, if you're a death metal fan, you definitely know this band, you definitely know this album, but if you haven't, oh my god, this has been one of the big catalysts in terms of a newer movement in Ohio death metal. These guys pack all that old school riffery with just flat out brutality, like Mortician levels of brutality meets like sort of Cannibal Corpse, like the old school Florida sound kind of mixed in, and holy shit, this album blew me away when it came out. I was a big fan of their debut EP, but this put it on another level, which is why I'm bringing it up here. Again, we've reviewed this, we've gone over it, we bring up this band a lot. I've seen this band a lot here lately, and they put on a killer live show. But I want to touch base on it again because this album is fucking amazing, and I think this is one of the best examples of great Ohio death metal right now. I love this band's riff-a-minute style. It's not like super technical, but there's a lot of cool transitions all throughout. There's a surprising amount of atmosphere on here in terms of like the horror aesthetic. This band is all about gore and violence, and I absolutely love it. The opening track, Skin Milk, is such a great pace setter, but I mean, shit, dude, I love all these songs, honestly. Phallic Filth, Itty Bitty Pieces. The riff that opens up Stifling Stew is perpetually stuck in my head, and that's kind of a cool thing about this band is they are brutal as hell, but they are very catchy. There's a lot of grooves to hang on to. There's a little bit of that hardcore sort of like punch to it. And in terms of the pacing of this album, pretty much every song on here is a fucking kick in the dick. Again, this band has sort of been like a catalyst for the whole like new Ohio death metal movement, and I would say they're kind of on that like Mount Rushmore of it right now, just because they put their name out there so much. They tour relentlessly, and that is fucking awesome. And so far, everything they've put out, granted a very short amount, has been awesome, and it has literally exploded. These guys have been on a ton of tours. In fact, they are on one with Creeping Death right now and Travel Gaze. Probably gonna go see that here next month. So yeah, probably a more well-known one here, but I had to bring it up. And for those that have not checked out 200 Stab Wounds, oh my god, check it out. It's like one of the best death metal bands out there right now. I might be a little biased just because they're from my home state, but I mean, there's bands in my home state that I don't like. So, you know what, that might not have anything to do with it. The point is, this is great Ohio death metal, and you should check it out. Mutilatred, Dissecting Your Future. This is the debut album from this Toledo-based death metal act. Actually, brutal death metal act would be way more accurate, and I would even say this is possibly the heaviest band in Toledo right now. Now, this was self-released in 2015. They are currently on Redefining Darkness. Actually, I just went over their new album, and that is obscenely brutal as well. But the thing I like about this band as far as their style of brutal death metal is there's a lot of old school death metal mixed in here. While you get all these slams and blast beats you could probably ever want, there's a lot of just good riffy sections on here, and it's that sort of mix of stuff like, you know, like Devourment, but you also have stuff that is very akin to like Incantation in terms of like more doomy atmosphere or slower breakdowns. I had only heard rumblings of this band a few years ago, and then I saw them on a bill here in Toledo, the Club Frankie's, and legit blown away by the live performance, bought the album from them right there, and I've been a fan ever since. And again, with their style of brutal death being maybe a little bit different, like just in terms of, again, like mixing old school death metal and flat out brutal death metal, and short songs. Like a lot of these songs in here are maybe like a minute and a half to 2.5 minutes. They really don't do a lot of longer songs like you do occasionally get some on here. But I think the whole idea is to condense as much brutality into a short song and just pummel you with it, and they fucking succeed. Plus, their song titles are fucking great. There's songs in here like, you know, track 3, Fuck You. That is simply the track name. And that's even followed by Forced to Stay Dead, which, that's a bummer. But honestly, like, the thing I like is, you know, that little bit of humor that's in there. Like, there's, you know, songs called Fuck Everything, mostly Clogged Arteries. You know, they kind of have fun with it, and I like the fact that there's, like, a little bit of levity in this outright brutal, disgusting music. Now, I will say I think their style has changed a little bit in their newer albums. I think they've become even faster and even more brutal. This one, I think, is a little bit more riffy, so like in terms of a starting point for this band, I would go here. With songs like Submerged in Agony, it's a little bit slower, a little bit more riffy, and I kind of like the more like doomy atmosphere to it. But sometimes they can go a little bit overboard on atmosphere. The last track, Exploded Veins, while I do like the first part of it, it does have a long drawn out ambient outro with like pianos and such. And it's cool for the atmosphere, but it doesn't feel like the way to close such a brutal fucking album. But pretty much everything else about this band I absolutely love. If you have not checked out Mutilatred, I recommend checking out all their albums. I'm probably a bigger fan of this one just because I've had this one for longer, but I do like everything they put out. In terms of flat out heaviness, this might be the heaviest band on this entire fucking list, and that is definitely saying something because there's some brutal as fuck bands in here. But yeah, if you're just looking for something insanely fucking heavy and from Ohio, check this out. Dissected. This is their self-titled debut EP, came out in 2021. Band is from Tiffin, Ohio, and yes, I know I just brought this band up because I just saw them once again, but I've seen these guys 3 times, and in terms of up-and-coming Ohio death metal, this band is quickly becoming one of my favorites. The first time I ever saw them, they were actually at the record release party for 200 Stab Wounds for Slave the Scalpel. They were one of the opening bands, and they flat out fucking killed. This is pretty much brutal death metal with a lot of hardcore groove to it, kind of similar to 200 Stab Wounds, though I think they embrace more of like a doomy atmosphere. With every slam and every big riffy chug, there just seems to be like this prevailing doom-laden sound that is kind of behind it, and I absolutely love it. It kind of makes it stand out. That and their vocalist, who sounds like an absolute fucking feral beast on here. Watching these guys live, that dude is an absolute animal on stage. He pretty much just commands it, and well, I mean, your head's gonna be banging because this is so groove-laden. It does break it up a little bit with blast beats here and there, but this is more about that sort of hardcore, brutal death metal, kind of slammy groove. This is pretty much like Mortician meets Incantation. You kind of get the best of both worlds on there, except I think the songs are a little bit longer, so, you know, a little bit more on the Incantation side there. But in terms of the scathing brutality on this EP, it's definitely more in the vein of Mortician. Now, this is their only release so far, so this is a very new band, just in terms of like this whole Ohio death metal scene, but strongly recommend you check them out. If you get a chance to see these guys live, like if you're in the Ohio area or they're actually like touring outside of it, check them out. Their live performance, again, completely sold me, so hopefully it sells you guys. But the important part is definitely check this out. This is some awesome up-and-coming Ohio death metal. Sanguisugabogg, Tortured Whole. It's the debut album from this Columbus-based band, came out in 2021. I think pretty much everyone kind of knows about this band, but I had to bring it up because I think these guys are one of the like early success stories in terms of this Ohio death metal scene taking off. They got signed to Century Media and pretty much have taken off and just tour fucking relentlessly. This band is fucking ridiculous, and I think they have a style that really stands out. This is another band that kind of falls in that, you know, brutal death metal meets kind of old school and like a little bit of hardcore, but they do it with like an added flair in a lot of categories. Namely, like, lyrical themes, which are flat out fucking ridiculous. Their song titles are just fucking great. When Jam and John and I reviewed this, man, there was a long laugh take when we got down the song Dick Fillet. We just couldn't fucking say it without fucking giggling our fucking asses off. We still have the emotional maturity of, like, fucking teenagers despite being in our 40s. So, yeah, no, it was just fucking fun. But this band's style, I think, is just kind of awesome and sort of refreshing. The drum work in this band is absolutely fantastic. Yes, the pingy snare annoys the hell out of me. I'm not a fan of that sound, but it's the drum work itself. The fills are crazy and can kind of come out of nowhere. They're very jazzy, but it's cool how the riffs will follow a lot of these fills and kind of have these weird angular crawls like descending and ascending. And this band just knows how to pack brutality and kind of center it in on some solid grooves when they need to. But I like the fact that this band is just kind of strange. And I think to a degree because they were kind of strange and they kind of make fun of a lot of the tropes of brutal death metal that they get a lot of hate. There's a lot of people complaining that they have more shirt designs than they actually have music, and that might be true, but their shirt designs are pretty fucking sick. And regardless of how many songs they have, when they play them live, they sound fucking fantastic. The guitars have this sludgy, just dirty sound. I forget what the tuning is on here, but man, those strings are probably floppy as fuck. And Devin's vocal prowess is just fucking disgusting. Like, low gurgles, good fucking screams. Like, he's just a fucking monster on stage when you see him, too. This band is just flat out fun. Like, they're fun, they're adventurous, they're willing to sort of, like, you know, say fuck it to convention as far as, like, brutal death metal is concerned, and I think it makes for a very interesting band, and I have jammed this quite a bit, and initially I really wasn't a fan, but the more I listened to it, I was like, dude, I kind of get this now. Like, again, that snare kind of put me off, but when you hear like the wild drum work on Dragged by a Truck, that skittering sort of like ghost noted snare, I don't know, there's just something cool about that, even though the noise itself is kind of irritating. But overall, this album fucking whoops ass. I love their debut, Pornographic Seizures, too, if you haven't checked out that. Strongly recommend this band, but again, this is one of those more well-known ones, at least here, because this band, much like 200 Sad Wounds, has definitely exploded in popularity. But I was going to bring them up anyway, because I think this is a good representation of just interesting Ohio death metal. So if you have not checked out this band for any reason, or maybe you heard more from the hate train than you did from the fans, I recommend checking them out, give them a chance. I think they're flat out awesome. And yeah, you're going to be in for some weird fucking songs in here, but they're fucking brutal and they're fucking awesome, so check it out. Gutted, Bleed for Us to Live. It's the debut album from this Toledo-based band, came out in 1994. Want to get a lot of love for my hometown here because my hometown had some killer bands at one point. And honestly, it does right now, but in terms of like 90s death metal, this is probably the most revered piece from Toledo, Ohio out there. I have heard tons of people gush about this album. Hell, even when we were just starting the channel, you know, bringing up we were from Toledo, it was like, oh, then you guys fucking know Gutted. And it's like, well, I mean, I know of them and I hadn't jammed them yet. And it was kind of hard to find a copy of this because literally every copy of this, regardless if it's a reprint or an original, you're going to be paying out a lot of money. But when I finally did get a copy of this, I can see why there was so much hype around this. Now, this band was actually formed by three brothers, the Ditch Brothers, and these guys apparently were just incredible fucking songwriters and musicians because this is a flat-out damn near masterpiece of old school 90s death metal. Very groove-laden, lots of different kinds of riffs, like you have thrashier riffs in here, you have more of that, you know, straight-up 90s death metal sound, but you also have like doom metal riffs, especially in the opening track, Bleed, and Death Before Dismember. Lots of D beats, lots of killer fucking breakdowns. If I was to compare this to any other possibly more well-known bands in terms of like 90s death metal, very similar to Morta Skald, especially the first two albums, and I would say Monstrosity, but maybe with less blast beats. This is just flat out riff fucking city, and that's the thing I really like about this. Like, the songs all have giant hooks, and again, big dynamic shifts where they just change from different styles of riffs. Cold in the Coffin has a really cool doom-laden bass intro, but then you get into some like galloping chugs that kind of remind me a bit of This Mortal Coil off of Heartwork, which that's like one of my favorite Carcass songs ever, so anything that reminds me of Carcass, damn good chance I'll probably love. The main riff on Chock Full of Guts, which I absolutely love that fucking play on words, absolutely fucking amazing, just straight up, just classic death metal sounding. And then you have like a more of a thrashy song with Skeleton Eyes. This album is a legit underrated gem. I don't know if I brought this up in an underrated albums, but I definitely showed it off in a collection update fucking forever ago, and been looking for any chance to actually bring up this album again because it is absolutely fantastic. Now, they only put out one other album after this, and then they kind of broke up. Unfortunately, one of the brothers passed, and I probably should have wrote down which one, but I was kind of in a hurry, and I overlooked that one, so my bad, guys. Now, one of the Ditch Brothers, and I forget which one because, again, I should have wrote that shit down, he's actually in Blood and Bone with Brian Norwalk, which, as far as I know, hasn't put out anything in terms of, like, physical media. I don't know if they have a demo or anything out, but I know that they do exist. And I also know that if they do put out something, I would gladly bring it up on here because I want to get some cool representation for my town because not much cool goes on in this town. But yeah, in terms of, like, a classic, in terms of death metal from my hometown, this is probably it. Like, no disrespect to Descendant, because that is an absolutely awesome album, but I think fewer people know know about that one versus this one. Everything about it whoops ass. Every song has a clear fucking hook. This is a legit underrated gem. So if you've never checked this one out and you can find a copy for a reasonable price, go out and get it. If you love, again, shit like Mortal Scald, I would even throw in Obituary too because it's very groove laden. Definitely check this out. It's just fucking fantastic. Kurnugia, Forlorn and Forsaken. This is the debut album from this Cleveland-based death metal act. This band features current and former members of Embalmer, Integrity, and Ringworm, and this is a flat-out just nasty death metal album, but it's interesting in the sense that it sounds more European than it actually does in terms of like US death metal. A lot of this really sounds a lot like a more groove-laden Vomitory and, you know, maybe like a little bit of mellow death and some of the riffs like early Hypocrisy. Now, I stumbled upon this band, I think, in a distro, and I saw that they were from Ohio, and I wanted to check them out just because, you know, I always want to check out stuff from my home state because it's usually a good chance I'll get to see them, and this band is just flat out awesome. This came close to making my year-end list in 2020. I don't think it did. I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch, but I'm reasonably sure this didn't quite make it, but this was an absolutely fucking awesome album. Now, I've been saying this band's name wrong forever. Kurnugia, that's how you say it. I was calling it Kurnugia, which in hindsight sounds stupid. It's not quite like the Mortiferum thing where I think Mortiferum just sounds cooler than Mortiferum, but Mortiferum is apparently how you say it. At least I think so. I'm not 100% on that one. It's kind of an ongoing theme here, but either way, I love that band too. But back to this band. Overall, the sound is very brutal, but also very melodic. Like, it has very distinct kind of European death metal hooks. The production is fantastic. Everything is just fucking gnarly sounding on here, but very well like mixed. Like, there's the right amount of compression on it. The drums sound huge. The vocals are nice out in front. And Jesus, this guitar tone is fucking massive sounding. The album is paced wonderfully, and I'd say just kind of overall, like, it's an old school death metal album with a bit of a brutal edge to it and some nice nods to melody to kind of give it a little bit of flavor. And while all the original material on here is absolutely fantastic, like, there is not a song I don't like on here, I absolutely love their cover of When the Moment of Death Arrives, originally done by Sentence. That's what closes us out, and this is just a fantastic cover. I love Shadows of the Past. That is like one of the best finished death metal albums ever, in my opinion, and they absolutely fucking crush it on here. Now, I haven't heard very much about this band touring, unfortunately. Now, I know that Paul actually fronts Embalmer, and Embalmer still gets around quite a bit, so in terms of like getting everyone together with their other projects, might be just a studio-only project, but hopefully these guys get around to touring because I would love to hear this live. So out of all these, I would say this one definitely has maybe the most melodic hooks on it, but don't think it's not just insanely fucking brutal, because it is. Strongly recommend checking this out. Hopefully they do a follow-up, because this was an absolutely amazing debut. Again, if you like your death metal with, you know, fierce old-school death metal nods as well as melody and just flat-out brutality, check this out. It's absolutely badass. Nunslaughter Goat. This is the second full-length album, came out in 2003 from this, well, now Cleveland band. They originally formed in Pittsburgh, but they've been in Cleveland for longer, so we're fucking claiming them. They're ours. Nunslaughter fucking rules. This band has been around since 1987. This is only their 5th full-length, but do not think that they don't fucking work hard. They don't take any time off, because this band's discography might be the most loaded discography I have ever fucking seen on the archives. Like, I think even Boris and the Melvins might have to play catch up to Nunslaughter. Now, I honestly forget where I came upon Nunslaughter. It might have been this album. It might have been the one that came out after this one in terms of full lengths. It's, again, impossible to keep up with all their output. Like, if you went after the 7 inches alone, it's just a fucking ridiculous amount. But I instantly fell in love with this pretty much no fucks given thrashy death metal style they have. This band is equal parts fun and blasphemous, and I think blasphemy is fun, so that's like a perfect little hodgepodge. I love just how fast and aggressive these guys play. They're short, aggressive songs, riff-centric as hell. Dawn of the Dead's vocals are fucking amazing on here. He's very well enunciated, has a good mid-range scream, but he can get lower, he can get higher, and this band is just flat-out ridiculous in terms of just how fast and how aggressive they play. Recently saw them at MDF. It was the first time seeing him. I've been a longtime fan, and they absolutely killed live. And of course, they played some songs off this album, because this album, I would say, in terms of their discography, might be one of the classics here. I know for a fact they played Raid the Convent. I think they played Satanic Slut. Honestly, it didn't matter. They could play any fucking song and I probably would have loved it just because I love their style overall. There's a good hardcore / punk aesthetic to this, just in terms of just pure fuck you energy and just going for it. The production is a little bit more lo-fi, a little bit grittier and dirtier sounding. The guitar tone in here absolutely fucking snarls. It's very meat and potatoes death metal, but it's done at such a high level of energy, and their commitment to all things just sleazy and blasphemous, it makes the song stand out. It makes them feel even more energetic. And the atmosphere in here is great with all the horror samples, but honestly, as the Cacodemons Feast probably has some of the most like disturbing vocal like filters and shit on there. Like he just starts gurgling and kind of puking at the end, and I don't know, it just works for what they're going for, which is, again, pure blasphemous fun. In terms of extreme metal, I think this is one of our most well-known old school acts. I absolutely love Nunslaughter. I think their discography is next impossible to collect, especially me being only a CD collector. I kind of have to try to find all the compilations of all the stuff that they put out on 7-inch, which there's a lot of fucking compilations too. Again, this band's discography is fucking insane. But believe me, I want all of it because everything I've heard has been absolutely incredible. If you have never jammed Nunslaughter, maybe start with the full length since there's only 5 of them, and then kind of choose your path in terms of their discography. I can almost guarantee whatever you're going to get on there is going to be fast, loud, and just awesome. That is exactly what Nunslaughter does, and they do it so fucking well. I strongly recommend this one. This was back with their original drummer, Jim Sadis. Rest in peace once again. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dead members that I have to bring up on here, but I definitely want to bring him up because he was just a fucking maniac. The dude was awesome. But yeah, the important part is check out Nunslaughter because they're fucking Nunslaughter, and that should be all the reason you need. Check it out. Necrophagia Deathtrip 69. This is the 6th album from this Wellville, Ohio death metal act. Often considered one of the earliest death metal acts, at least in this area. They've been around since the late 80s. I believe Phil Anselmo was actually in the band for a short period of time because he expressed a lot of interest in them. I think that was around 1998, which was on the album Holocausto de la Muerte, I believe. I don't own any earlier stuff, but I wanted to bring up this band because this is, you know, probably one of Ohio's biggest claims to like early death metal. Possibly even more than Nunslaughter, since I believe at that time Nunslaughter was still in Pittsburgh, so this is purely Ohio. Now, while I don't own a lot of the earlier stuff, and I do mean to get it, I had to bring up this one just because of the very unique packaging. Now, I know Brian Arkham actually has this album too because he showed it off, and we compared copies, and I think mine has a little bit more viscosity in terms of the blood pack that's in here. This was my first exposure to the band. I'd heard the name before, but when I saw the packaging in here, it was kind of hard to resist. And then I actually jammed the album and was like, dude, this is pretty fucking gnarly. Very thrashy death metal, and a lot of variety in here just in terms of styles. Like this can get very brutal, very groove laden, but also very thrashy and very melodic. The song Tomb with a View actually has some really killer guitar harmonies that are a little bit closer to like Iron Maiden than they are death metal. Now, while I like the sound of this album, I think the guitars might be on overdrive in here. They have this giant gainy sound, but the massive crunch they deliver is man, it's pretty fucking nasty. But my main appeal for this band was kind of just how much fun they have with this. Like, the themes are kind of like goofy and over the top, and I love that. And you have Killjoy's fucking amazing vocals on here, just hamming it up and delivering just some insane sounding vocal passages. Now, unfortunately, we lost him back in 2018, which is sad because, you know, he was kind of an innovator in terms of like Ohio death metal and to a degree, death metal itself, which is definitely why I want to get more of the earlier stuff. But this album is a lot of fun and has some really interesting guests on here. You have Mick Thompson of Slipknot, Casey Chaos of Amen, and Maniac, formerly of Mayhem, on here, all contributing little bits. Like, you know, Mick's obviously doing guitars, Casey and Maniac doing vocals and kind of working with Killjoy. And honestly, the results are really good on here. The songs are very riffy. They have great hooks. The song Suffering Comes in Sixes, absolutely one of the catchiest songs on here. I love the giant riffy chug that's on there. And again, surprisingly melodic, so there was a lot in this band's wheelhouse. Now, unfortunately, after Killjoy died, this band broke up. They had one other release after this. I did have that one, And I wanted to bring up that one, but this one kind of just called me because it's fucking covered in blood. And this is also where I got into them, so this is kind of an important one. But yeah, I strongly recommend this one, much like I recommend all these. This is some killer Ohio death metal. Again, might not be as good as some of the earlier stuff, but I still think this is a really solid album, so check it out. And finally, Mutilation Barbecue, Abortion Ambulance. Yet another one that I brought up not too long ago in a collection update, but in terms of like very new blood here in Ohio and the whole Ohio death metal scene, I gotta bring up this band again. I originally found out about these guys the same time I found out about Dissected. They were one of the opening acts for 200 Stab Wounds record release party, and oh my god, they absolutely fucking killed it. This is a very young band that has a very old school sound, and they pretty much just do everything right, and they add a fair amount of humor to it, which I absolutely love. Now, this is essentially a single and a re-release of their original EP, which I bought from them at that show, and I jammed a lot because it's only like 8 minutes long overall, but the songs, absolutely amazing. But this also has those songs on here because they reissued them, but they also threw on some new ones, and I like the current direction of this band. Abortion Ambulance and the song Dying, two of the new ones, definitely shows off that they're writing longer songs and they're a little bit more intricate. This band has really good technical chops, but they're all about the brutality and they're all about being over the top as hell. I've seen these guys 3 times, and honestly, I think they keep getting better and keep getting tighter live. The last time we saw them in Tiffin, they absolutely owned one of their best shows yet, and they're currently working on a full length, which I am super excited for. I've talked to their frontman multiple times, which holy shit, that dude's vocals are fucking great. But he said he's been a fan of Thralls since before this band existed, and that kind of blew my mind. But he was super excited to see us the first time, and he's been excited to see us every time. And, well, the feeling's mutual because I'm excited to see these guys live every time because, dude, this band is absolutely awesome. Very similar to 200 Stab Wounds, again, groove-laden, but brutal as hell. But, man, the riffs on here are so goddamn catchy. The drum work's fucking amazing. This band, in a short amount of time, I think is starting to garner a fair amount of a following, and they should have it because they're fucking awesome. You can hear the difference between the older stuff on the EP versus the newer stuff on here in terms of being more intricate and a little bit more focused and thought out, but they've retained the energy, and I think that's the main thing. This band just fucking brings it live. And they found that perfect balance of brutality and flat-out hookiness. It's like Cannibal Corpse and Dying Fetus merged together, which even Dying Fetus says, like, we want to make the most brutal stuff we can with catchy riffs. And that is exactly what they're doing here. Now, again, they don't have a huge body of work because this band is very new, but I strongly recommend trying to find this or get their original EP if you can as well, because they're both fantastic. If you find the CD version, you will actually have the EP on it, but get both. Why not? I mean, I'm a collector, so I'm a little biased there. Of course I wanted both. But the main point is, check out this band. They are awesome new blood for the whole Ohio death metal scene, and there's a lot of bands that I didn't get a chance to bring up, but I definitely wanted to bring up this one because this is definitely a new band that I would say I'm very proud is from my home state because they're doing a damn good job. So yeah, definitely check this out. All right, that knocks out Ohio, at least as far as death metal. I mean, I'll probably come back to here and do a different style or just talk about metal from Ohio again, but it's time for me to move on to another state, and I have no idea how I'm going to choose another state. I mean, the next obvious one in terms of death metal for me would at least be Texas, or maybe, you know, just the whole Portland scene out in Oregon. But I don't know. I gotta do some more research and figure out what other scenes out there outside of death metal that are big, because death metal is kind of the hot commodity right now in terms of like the extreme metal stuff. But there are definitely going to be more of these videos. I don't know if it's going to be like monthly or bi-monthly, mainly because there's a lot of research that goes into all this stuff, and it definitely takes me time to put that together, plus with other stuff. But I know I want to continue this because this was a lot of fun. Granted, starting in Ohio, you know, I kind of had a little bit of an advantage here, but it was really cool talking about my home state in a positive light, which I really don't do very often because you know, it's Ohio. It's all right. But our death metal, pretty fucking good. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below to thrallsmetal.com where there is a link to our Patreon. And while you're there, you can actually order one of our killer shirts. In terms of stuff that's going on the channel, again, figuring out a date to get together for Pantera, we are pretty much fucking ready for that one. And of course, a bunch of reviews coming, probably some more underrated albums coming in the future. We're just gonna keep loading you guys with just killer metal content, like literally as much as we possibly can do. And of course, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has liked, subscribed, commented, all that stuff. You guys keep us going. I know this is like the big thank you spiel that I do at the end, but I mean it, and I try to express it in different ways, and I often fail, and it comes out probably maybe a little bit cringy, but I mean it. Like, you know, legit, you guys just keep us going. Like, it's absolutely amazing what we've done here, and it would be nothing without you guys. So thank you so much once again, and we will catch you later.